Hi there. Before we get started, I'm extremely proud to say that this episode of The Petrified Comedian was brought to you by 4x3. 4x3 is an independent media company creating comedy content on YouTube. This week, they dropped Tabari McCoy's new special, Be Happy. Tabari is a hilarious, award-winning comedian who covers a huge range of topics, from the pandemic to education to dating app disasters. Support independent comedy at youtube.com/@FOURXTHREE or by looking up 4x3 on YouTube. Please enjoy the show. Loren Hutton is a Cincinnati-based comedian and co-host of the podcast How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I'm going to start right over. First of all, wait, do you guys still call it How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, or is it just Love the Bomb?
Sometimes we call it that when we're very, very, very having fun and forget that we shortened the name to just Love the Bomb.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to start. Go ahead and give a take two. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Loren Hutton is a Cincinnati-based comedian and co-host of the podcast How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. His comedy style is charming and conversational while still managing to be hilariously off the cuff. Loren, ahoy.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Like the chips.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. That's very weird that you say that particular thing, because I used to greet people like that constantly, and no one got it. No one got it for years until my dad said, you should stop. It makes you seem weird when you say ahoy and people are like, hi. And I'm like the chips. They're like, you're just at Kroger. You need to calm down.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've definitely had plenty of inside jokes that have gone on far too long throughout my life. So just to get started, if you could describe your comedy in 3 words, what would they be?
Loud, close to the chest, and inconsistent.
Wonderful. I like that. So like honest and just a little all over the place. I can understand that. I'm starting to write my first stand-up little 5-minute set. And
have you performed yet?
No, actually. So kind of the goal of this podcast is by episode 10, I have to do my first open mic. By episode 20, I want, my next like 10 episodes each, I want to do an open mic. And then I want to start making that a more consistent thing. So my goal by the end is to force myself to upload an open mic every 3 to 5 episodes moving forward. But so, this podcast is called The Petrified Comedian. I am someone who I love performing. I've performed in a lot of different things throughout my life. Comedy was sort of the line for me. Like I've been in comedic plays. I used to shoot videos with my friends and stuff, and I've always loved comedy. But something about the idea of getting up on a stage and reading something that you wrote just has completely terrified me to my core since I was 8 and first started watching stand-up comedy. I could just never imagine how anybody would do that.
You started watching stand-up when you were 8?
Maybe younger. So actually, I can remember.
Of course you were scared of it. Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Some of the first stand-up comedy I can remember listening to is Jeff Foxworthy, actually, when I was about 6 years old.
Okay.
And at the time, I'm the youngest of my siblings by 6 and then 10 years. So they wanted me to be able to laugh along with everyone else. So they were explaining the jokes. Like he had a joke about a beaver who bit off his brother-in-law's happy place. And I was like, what's a happy place? So yeah, since I was very, very young, I've been watching stand-up comedians and just thinking that is like the most terrifying thing anyone could do. But I love it. So yeah, the goal of this podcast is just to talk to people and figure out what pushes them to go and do stand-up comedy.
Gotcha. Okay. So, sorry, I'm used to doing podcasts, and I'm biting back on the reins real hard of just firing questions at you.
I totally understand.
I'm sitting in a different seat. I have to get used to that.
Just to kind of turn it back towards you, is comedy one of your main jobs?
No, no, and I don't know if it ever will be. I don't know if that landscape exists, or it will exist by the time I get to the point that, the talent, drive, and luck, or whatever the things that happen for comedy to be your full time job. I don't know, man. Every roadmap is different. Everyone's terms for success are different. But as far as like doing comedy as your main gig, I mean, there's never been a lot of money in it, and there's not less now, especially at the level that I'm at, where I'm not out on the road. I'm not booking clubs on any sort of a regular basis, which is a very nice way to say I've never done it. But when you have everything ahead of you, it's really, really weird to even think in a headspace of like, well, what if this was like my full time thing?
What do you do for work?
I fix vans sometimes, and other times I schedule them to be fixed, which I think is all I'm legally allowed to say about it.
Oh, for sure. Do your coworkers know you do stand up?
Some of them do, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I always somehow make the mistake of every job that I've ever had. It's only a matter of days before I fail to hold that in. And it's not like I never want people to know, but it's just I blather everything out of my face the moment it pops into my head. So if I'm thinking about an open mic that I was at, and I'll turn to a coworker that I don't even know that well, I'll start talking about that. And they're like, what do you mean? What's an open mic? Do you play music or something? And then you have to explain or make something up, which is also fun.
I was about to say you do play music though, right?
Yeah, and that's I've actually done that way longer than I've done comedy, and the music thing is actually why I know 100% that my family does not support my comedy, because it's not that they don't support performance. That's not it at all. Not it at all. My dad is a full-time professional Santa Claus. Performance is in the family,
That's
uh,
amazing.
but they've always said very earnestly, like, I think you would just find success if you would focus on the music. Which
That's
I don't know,
amazing.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I've been dealing with my parents always wanted me to do something in comedy because they know I've always loved it. So now I have this podcast and I'm gonna have an open mic, and I'm like, a lot of what I've been writing is about my family or about, it's like kind of personal stuff, and I'm like, they are gonna be the first people who want to see it. I don't know. I have to think about that a little bit.
Are you planning on calling them out from like the stage? Is that like part of it? You said you're writing about them a lot, and if you know they're going to be there, is that part of the plan?
Well, that's the question, because what I've figured out so far is that I don't struggle to write about myself at all. What I struggle to do is dial back. So
Okay.
I have paragraphs and paragraphs that I think maybe one in every five paragraphs is something I'm going to use. But when I'm trying to be creative like that, I try to just keep writing and get out, like if it anything I'm thinking, I just try to get it down on my little joke note app.
Get it out of the head, get it somewhere else so it stays. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I fear that if anyone ever found that note app, they would think I was deranged, because it's just a bunch of like half thoughts and
Yeah, a joke notebook is not something that can be found out of context, in
no.
any format, whether it's in your phone or it's an actual notebook. Yeah, you can't leave that lying around, man. It's just like a societal bomb.
Yeah. I think about Mike Birbiglia. In his podcast, he talks. His podcast is called Working It Out, and so he actually has comedians bring their joke notebook on, and they try to work out like a quick gag on the
Okay.
podcast. And what's so cool about that is you get to hear everyone talk about their own version of that joke notebook. And like Sam Morril specifically said, like if anyone found his joke notebook, like there's doodles and there's like he uses different colored pens. It literally looks like something a serial killer would be carrying around.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, I think it's interesting to see like what people's different processes are for stuff like that.
Are all of yours like digital? Is it all just in your phone?
Right now, it's just digital. If I'm not near my phone and I think of something, I'll scrawl it out onto a piece of paper until I can get it in.
Okay.
But yeah, you really are a podcast host. You've successfully turned this around onto me. But honestly, so I as I'm working into this podcast, it is partially the podcast is partially about me. It's framed around the comedians I'm meeting and the people that I'm trying to get advice from and talk to about what pushed them into this lifestyle. But I don't I don't feel like I have to refrain too much from talking about myself, because the more I'm able to talk about myself and like little bit by little bit in each episode, the more my audience will get to know me. And it'll be
Right.
like those my listeners will be like in on the joke, kind of, you know what I mean?
Man, I don't remember if it was part of the episode or not, or if it was something I mentioned earlier, but the landscape not existing the way that it did before. This is a very, very interesting and I think smart way to breach into. You're building an audience before you have the talent because you're giving them the opportunity to see you literally from day one.
Absolutely.
That's a very unique approach. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I had the idea. I'm actually working on a friend's podcast. He interviews musicians in the jam band scene.
Okay. Just talks to fish over and over again. Nice.
Talks to every single person who is ever inspired by fish, pretty much.
We've all met that guy. We've all met that guy on a couch.
Absolutely, absolutely, we have. And he's awesome. But he sort of got me thinking about what would I do if I was gonna do a podcast for myself. And I was like, well, the people I want to talk to are comedians, because what could be more fun than talking to a bunch of comedians?
On a good day, yeah. On the wrong day, it's the worst. It's the worst thing you could ever run into. Talk to a comic after they've had a really bad week and they also just bombed at their favorite whatever, and it's oh no, why is their energy just dark?
Yeah, Chris Seamer. I just spoke to him last week. He touched on the same thing. There's a lot of dark sides to the lifestyle of comedy.
I'm so glad you brought up Chris. Oh man, he's one of my favorite people to run into at a show when like he's just like, oh, you've had a day, haven't you, brother?
Yeah, he's awesome. I actually got to see Chris perform at a Don't Tell comedy show, and they had a heckler in the front row.
No kidding. Where was it?
This was in Columbus. It
You're not
was
supposed to
just
say.
like,
You're not supposed to say. It's don't tell.
oh, that's true. I ruined it. Well, I can cut this out. It's my podcast. But yeah, it was literally in the back of some, like, it was the back room to a bar. It wasn't even connected to the bar. They
Oh,
just had
okay.
chairs set up, but somebody in the front row had a purple top hat, and it was his birthday, and he decided it was his show. So I got to see that, and then talk to both Osha and Chris, who were the opening acts of that show. I got to get both of their perspectives on dealing with that particular heckler. Now, neither of them bombed at all, but kind of speaking of that, speaking of bombing, what inspired you to start your podcast talking to comedians about bombing?
What? Oh man, that is a very good question, Adam. Wow. What inspired me to start Love the Bomb? I didn't.
It's a good answer.
Yeah, no, nothing inspired me. I had done, I think, 4 other podcasts up until that point that had fizzled out because I was the one running them. And not to say that they were bad podcasts. I got a lot of good feedback from people that were on the show, people that had listened to the shows. There was also one of them that I did for almost a year straight without missing a week. I collapsed and evolved it into a different show that didn't turn out to be what I had originally envisioned, and I felt I was so far away from what I wanted to be doing. And I was also incredibly busy. Uh, so many things collapsed, and at a time when I just didn't think that I was going to be doing much of anything. I was contemplating quitting comedy and just settling. Um, or at least that's when the idea first hit my head. Luke Fagenbush, my co-host, reached out to me about doing a show that was going to be sponsored by a local brewery, which it no longer is because they canceled us for reasons. But that's how it got started. It was originally supposed to be Zach Schonkweiler and Luke Fagenbush. They were supposed to do a podcast for Radio Artifact.
Okay.
And Schonkweiler got busy with life, and so they roped me into it. And I was like, "Yeah, cool." I was trying to settle, so sure, let's pivot away from that.
Absolutely. So you guys have what, like nearly 100 episodes, right?
Oh, I stopped counting. We've uploaded an episode every week with the exclusion of one hiccup, 2 years. So yeah, it's been a lot of episodes.
As a podcaster, can I ask what that hiccup was?
Yeah, you can ask. That doesn't guarantee I'll remember. There was something that happened either this past September or the one before that. We used to run the show so close to the chest as far as scheduling goes that sometimes we'd reach out to somebody that day and be like, "Hey, can you come by?" And due to that, there were several close calls, and me and Luke thought that we had gotten really good about juking the system, and there were some moments where I was, hastily editing things on my lunch break and putting them out, that day. And just one of those times it slipped through the cracks where we didn't have anyone on the schedule. We couldn't get anyone on the schedule. Life happened. It was no one's fault. That's my point. It was no one's fault.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned quite a few lessons about podcasting already just from trying it. So the only reason I'm doing this at this point, I actually have Osha Dwyer to thank because
okay.
I reached out to her. I had thought about doing this podcast. I reached out and got a logo made. I have ADHD, so when I get excited about an idea, I'm like,
all in, baby.
Buy the things. Yeah. Absolutely. So I already had a podcast made. I've reached out to multiple musical comedians to collaborate on a theme song. Like I went full speed into this before ever thinking about like what the format of the podcast would be.
Okay.
And then so I was like, well, I need guests, right? So I started reaching out to some people, and I reached out to 8 people, thinking if anybody says yes, I'll keep pushing forward on this. And I woke up and like 5 people had said yes. And I was shocked. I was just like, whoa, comedians want to be on a podcast. So,
right.
And there are, like you said, the landscape there are in Cincinnati alone, there are dozens of comedians that I could have on the podcast in my hometown alone.
So many more than that, man. Like, Cincinnati is huge as far as like comedy, very funny people that you have never heard of. And realistically, like, might not do it more than a few years. There's so many people that start and stop and then come back to it after, a long hiatus and whatnot. It's so weird the way that this living creature that is the Cincinnati comedy scene flexes and grows, and occasionally something will happen crazy with a virus, and it'll have to cut off its tail and regrow it in parking lots.
Yeah.
But I consider myself wildly lucky to be here, and any comic in Cincinnati that doesn't count that as a credit to come up here is maybe, I don't know, I don't want to call them dumb, but because that seems mean, but that seems dumb to me to not know how good we have it here.
Yeah, Cincinnati's a unique place. I no longer live there, but always loved living there when I grew up, and someday I might end up back there.
Where are you now?
Columbus.
That's right. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. That explains the where are we doing the podcast in your computer question.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and then going back to OSHA, the reason that she pushed me into this was I reached out to OSHA in particular because I had seen her perform and I had a unique story to tell that particular instance of that specific heckler. And she was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I said, "Oh, awesome." And kind of as almost as a joke, I said, "Well, could you do this Saturday?" And she said, "Sure." And so I said, "Oh, well, do you want to come to my parents' house in Cincinnati and record in the spare bedroom?" And she said, "Yeah, that sounds good." So I gave her every opportunity to say, "Hey, maybe get yourself figured out."
Yeah, yeah. Every opportunity to just be like, maybe there's some gaps in the logic here before you execute this plan.
Gaps in the logic, gaps in pretty much everything. I mean, I instead of buying a microphone, I decided to buy two cameras that didn't have good microphones.
There we go.
The audio for that podcast is terrible, and I'm still going to release it because I'm really proud of the interview. OSHA's hilarious. You know, she tells some
Hell
great
yeah, dude.
stories on that. And you know, when I was talking to my friend who also has a podcast, he said it's going to be that much more fun to go back and look at that episode. You know,
Right.
50 episodes down the line. So you know, at this point, and OSHA's like the coolest person. I've said, you know, after all this like being very up for the podcast, I said, "Hey, it didn't go well. I might ask you to ADR some lines, like re-record." And she goes, "Yeah, just let me know."
Oh my God.
So,
She's like one of the best people that I've ever met.
and
God.
honestly, just so talented. Just, you know, she is 6 years into stand-up comedy, and you know that's
Right, to have what she has on stage, that commanding funny. Um, yeah, man. So, and again, she lives in Cincinnati.
absolutely. So do you.
Oh,
You don't have much out there, but of the clips that I had that you do have out there, I really, really enjoyed some of your stuff.
thank you, sir.
Your co-host Luke said, you know, I
Cohorst is closer.
co-horse, yes. But you know, I said like, how would you describe his comedy? Because you know, I only had a few minutes of your stuff to watch to figure it out, and he said, you know, really charming and conversational. And you know, like I think about the way that the one a heckler video that you have up, where someone just shouts out, and you're like, "Shut up!" Just the way, like it wasn't mean. It wasn't. It just was honest. It was a like you said. It was the first thing that came to your mind. Just shut up.
Yeah, very, very from the hip. And I'm glad it doesn't come across as mean. Hearing that from a stranger that just sees it in a video. And I know that there's a laugh at the end of that clip.
Oh yeah, big
But
one.
I don't feel good about ever like being aggressive in any way with anybody. So I'm always so happy when it actually gets a laugh. Because I don't ever want those things to come out of my face.
Yeah. The with the heckler at the Don't Tell Comedy Show, he somehow managed to shout out the punchline to one of OSHA's jokes.
Oh no, a drunk fan?
No, he guessed it.
Oh, that's worse.
I know. And so she was like, maybe, and I went back and watched it in her special, and she was maybe 3 to 10 words away from the punchline. Like she was so close to it. And so she just stops and goes, "Well, I can't do that joke anymore. What can I say about you?"
Well, I mean, if someone is going to insist on making themselves a part of the show when they're not, and it's not a situation where it makes more sense to remove them from the room,
Hmm.
yeah, dig in, dig in. It's kind of supper time at that point.
Have you had any like particularly bad experiences with hecklers?
All the time, it's so different doing comedy now. I hate it. People won't shut the. Can I curse on your podcast?
Absolutely. Feel free.
People won't shut the fuck up when they are watching stand-up comedy. It is the most annoying and aggressive thing. Um, I took a break and decided that I was done, and I was like, I'm just a podcaster now. And then I got back into it, but then after I got back into it even more, it was just like every moment that ever could go good, there was always at least one person that just had to throw in a word or a woo. I don't know if a woo is a heckle. I'm not 100% sure, but I hate when people woo at me. It makes me uncomfortable and it takes me out of my headspace. So don't woo at comedians. That's my PSA. I'm going to go ahead and put a line in the sand. Wooing is heckling. We're saying it here first on the Petrified Comedian. Wooing is heckling. Don't do it.
You heard it here first. If you ever see Loren Hutton, you better not woo him. Unless, wait, are you single? Do you want to be wooed romantically?
Not when I'm performing. Those are not the times.
Do not woo Loren Hutton romantically when he is on stage. You save it for after the show.
Oh, don't do it then either. It makes me feel bad no matter what.
Okay. So we'll be leaving Loren alone after the show. Okay.
There we go.
Just on the topic of your podcast, with considering you have so many episodes, for my guests, do you have an episode, like if you were just to pick one off the top of your head that you're really proud of? Is there anyone in particular you'd want someone to listen to?
One that I'm really proud of is that's an interesting question, because this podcast is something that I became proud of, that I did because it was fun at first, and then it became something that I was proud of, which was like a weird transition to have something that you're just like, and then over time it's like, oh, that gives me validation, and because that's dangerous. It's a very dangerous stone to turn over and find out like, oh, there's slugs here. There's a lot of slugs here when you don't get the right amount of whatever on the next thing that you put out, because now you're starting to put your validation on something that you've done for so long that it becomes part of your identity. Don't take that as a deterrent from you doing your podcast, though. Just keep doing it. Just make sure it stays fun. That would be my advice. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because when I started this, it very much started as a joke. I didn't think I didn't think anyone was going to say yes to me, and then once I decided I was doing this podcast, I didn't think anyone was going to want to listen. And my goal was to, like, I was like, I am not going to be a guy who you sit down and I say, hey, I have a podcast. So, I want to let things grow naturally if they're going to grow, and die naturally if they're going to die. But
yeah,
when I started it, I couldn't help but be excited about it, especially after the first interview. And I found myself wanting to talk about it with people, even though it was my one goal with this podcast was not to be the guy who says, hey, I have a podcast to everyone. And now, because I'm just so excited about it, I can't really help it.
Can relate, man. Can relate. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're making something and you're excited about it, it's hard not to talk about it. It's really hard not to talk about it, which is why everyone that has a podcast, the first thing that they say when you meet them is, I have a podcast, and then their name. Or comics are always doing bits on each other, because like that's their thing, man. That's their piece of clay that they're working with, and like it's show and tell. Everyone wants to show and tell. So yeah, I don't ever stop talking about your podcast. Become so obnoxious about it that people will like block you on Facebook and like not like want to talk to you, and then 3 years later that you'll show up in their feed organically, and then they'll like your next profile picture on Facebook, and that's the sweetest revenge that you can ever really get, is to just keep doing something long enough and being obnoxious about it to the point that all your friends and loved ones leave you and then come back. It's like that old phrase, if you love something, let it go, or be annoying enough that it leaves.
If you love something, tell them about your podcast.
If they come back, then they're really yours. Yeah, that is 100% the phrase.
So, going back to you for a moment. You went to Bible college
For a time.
for a time. How long did you stay?
I was there for 2 years. I was only enrolled for one.
Okay. So wait, how does that work?
You have friends that are like, yeah, man, just don't say anything. I don't have a roommate in this dorm right now. Here's my meal card. And then you just don't move back home and you try and figure it out when you're 20 and you have no faith and no money and no prospects. Yeah. But eventually the school was like, hey, you owe us money and your mailing address is still here. Are you around? Yeah, but yeah, I was in classes for the first year, which was long enough.
Yeah, I personally had a fairly harrowing college experience. Just I went to OSU, and I chose that school because I went to a really small high school, and I
And you
was
wanted
like,
to do a keg stand. Yeah, I get it.
Ironically, I didn't do my first keg stand until post graduation, but
Guess you were focused on the right things. Congrats.
To an extent, yeah. But going into OSU, it's this massive school, and I thought, it's going to be perfect. I'm going to have so many opportunities to make friends. But then what you realize is your opportunity to make friends is your freshman year. That's
Right.
the only time the university is going to help you meet anybody.
Right. That's very true.
So I certainly understand college being an interesting time.
Yeah, that's an atypical experience for sure.
Yeah.
It's not like having a class that also has you. My professor hooked me up with a gig at a church where I played guitar in front of teenagers on a weekend, and it was a $600 paying gig where I performed twice, and it was 3 worship songs. I played a total of 6 chords. It was $100 a chord. Like, church money is so stupid. Oh God, I didn't do that math till just now. That's a fun epiphany. Wow, man. Don't forget to tithe, guys.
Yeah, Taylor Tomlinson talks a lot about, coming up through the church comedy scene and how, yeah, she was a church comedian because the money's really good. You
No kidding.
get put up in a nice hotel right next to the church usually, and they pay really, really good money. But they monitor your social life, and she tweeted out something that ended up being one of her jokes in her first Netflix stand-up special, which was like, I don't want you guys to get me wrong, I am not bad in bed. In fact, I'm like a wild animal in bed, much more afraid of you than you are of me.
Nice. That's just a good joke.
She's a super talented comedian, but they fired her because of that. They fired her from a show.
Oh, because she
And
admitted to having premarital sex, which is a sin. And
of
that goes
course.
against the image of the church. Okay, now I'm doing the math. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she tweeted that
Oh,
and
well.
ended up losing like 10 jobs because of that, probably paying 500 a piece. So that's a lot of money.
That's wild.
Absolutely crazy.
But I mean, honestly, that was arguably the thing that pushed her into like more mainstream eyesight because if you're hungry, you're going to aggressively write, and suddenly you don't have the shackles of having to work clean anymore, and you can go after those rooms that you can just be yourself in. Yeah, I'm glad she got fired.
She is too. And, I think.
I'm glad that she is after I said that. Fuck.
It certainly helps.
It'd be wild if you're just like, nope, she doesn't feel that way, Loren. Maybe adjust your tone.
In fact, I have her right here. And
God, pan left.
At this point, I've got a few more questions about you I want to get to before I just ask you. So, you were an Irish person for 3 months. Tell me about that.
Oh, who did you talk to?
Do you actually want to know?
Nah. Yeah, I was. That is a way of describing what happened for those 3 months. Yeah, I was an Irish person. I went by the name Timothy O'Reilly. A few knew me by that name and thought me to be that persona. That was something that happened.
Care to elaborate?
Sure. When I was in college, I was very good friends with a guy named Dave Galt, who I met working at Kings Island. And we worked the Skyflyer ride, which is the big silver arch thing where you swing like, I don't know, it's like Spider-Man if his web came out of his ass. That's the vibe you get from the Skyflyer. And there's a ripcord for some reason. Anyways, Dave and I found out that we were both going to college in Louisville, and so we wanted to meet up and continue hanging out. And Dave was the first person that had ever gotten me drunk or high. And so meeting up with him in Bible college was a paramount thing for a young 19-year-old me. So the first time that he, hit me up and said, "What are you doing tonight? I think we should go to a party." I was like, "Of course, let's do it. Awesome. Sheltered kid. I'm going to break out of my shell and go to my first real party." I was so amped. And then we drove an hour and a half away from anything I knew. And I got scared the whole time and more anxious and more. And I kept looking at him. I was like, "Where are we going?" And he goes, "It's Aaron Yoakum's 21st birthday party." And Dave kept saying that until those words meant nothing. It may as well have been a flavor of a vape. I didn't know what the fuck it meant anymore. And finally we get there and I look at Dave and I was like, "I can't. There's 300 people in a field I don't know. There's a pit with mud in it. People are wrestling. There's too much going on for me to ingest all at once for the first time." And he goes, "Come on, man, there's jungle juice." And I was like, "I don't want any STDs. I can't." I thought the drink in the cooler was something you caught, and Dave was hyped about it. Like it was some cool herpes or something. But Dave put my mind at ease, and the way that he did that was he said, "Just do the thing that you used to do at Kings Island. Just go and be Irish." Which is something that I would do when I worked at Kings Island. People would come up to the Skyflyer, and I would greet them by saying, "Oh, just step right here on the lane there, yeah, I think." And if you said very few words in just enough of an Irish accent, all of the dads would ask you if you liked Guinness. It was like a math problem that always equaled 5. It was beautiful. So that was the plan. I was like, okay, I think I can do that. I'm never going to see any of these people again. Let's go be a person. And as I walked up, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to do this. I'm very nervous. And a few of Dave's very close friends came up. And they said, "Hey, Dave, who's this?" And I stepped into the circle with an amount of confidence that I didn't know where it was coming from. And I said, "I'm Timothy O'Reilly. It's nice to meet you." And they issued me into the party, demanding to do shots with, I was very quickly nicknamed the Dubliner. And then I blacked out very fast at that party, very fast. I remember taking my shirt off and handing it to Dave after he said he didn't want it. I remember having the microphone and commentating on the mud wrestling as Timothy O'Reilly. And then I remember getting me and Dave back to his dorm because he was puking into his sandals. And the next thing I remember is waking up on a couch in the common room of a dormitory suite that had like 5 living spaces in it. And it was not my friend Dave's. I didn't know where it was. I had no earthly clue who the fuck. This is a bunch of females. Shit. Why am I here? Where am I here? And then some very, very, very large frat person came out of one of those rooms and kicked me. And that's when I came to full consciousness and realization that I was fucked. And he said, Dave's looking for you. He's upstairs. And I was like, how does this man know me? Go out to go, Dave.
Yeah.
And I panicked, and I had a lot of racing thoughts. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I was confused. My head was very, very, very painful. But what came out of my face was, where the fuck am I? And then he said, you're on the 2nd floor. You need to be on the 5th floor. And I took the elevator to the 5th floor, and I found Dave. And he was like, man, I don't know what happened between you and that girl last night, but you were Irish. The whole time. You wouldn't stop. You didn't stop when it was just me and you trying to take a piss, and I had to tell you to stop, and you still wouldn't stop. And then I didn't stop, and I hung out with that girl for 3 months because she liked an Irish guy. I am not the hero of this story. I am a bad person that lied to a young lady about my identity for 3 months. So thanks for asking.
I was about to say, if you haven't written a bit about that, you should.
No, man, that's written. That's very written. Every time I've tried to do it on stage, the part of my brain that goes, "You're a bad person," gets real loud, and I can't perform that bit. So yeah, that's not a writing problem. That's a different hurdle to get over with that one.
I totally get that. I have several stories that would qualify for that. And
are you going to even out the playing field a little bit? What's your worst? Have you ever pretended to be someone and lied to a person for an amount of time?
It's odd that you say that, because yes, Irish, and 6 months.
Oh, they like chips. What the fuck, Adam? Wow. Okay, that's serendipitous, sir. Take us back.
I was in 6th grade. It was a lot longer ago. But we had a substitute. So my teacher broke her back, and she needed to get surgery. She was out for 6 months. And at this point, I had literally switched. I had switched classes twice in a row because I'd had bad teacher after bad teacher. I got this amazing teacher.
All of them kept breaking their backs.
Absolutely. I needed to stop stepping on cracks. But so this teacher is all of a sudden, I found out she's going to be out for the next 6 months. And I was upset. I was very upset because I said goodbye to a lot of my friends to leave this class and go in specifically for this teacher who I felt like abandoned me. So my coping mechanism for that was that I decided to convince the substitute teacher, the long-term substitute teacher, who I believe had me before as a sub.
Okay.
I decided that I'm just going to hold steady on my Irish accent, which was probably terrible. It'd probably be even worse today. But she at the very least played along. And but for 6 months, I would not, anytime she was in the room, I would speak in an Irish accent. And
you do have ADHD, don't you, bud?
Oh, yeah.
Right there with you, man. Right there with you. Squirrel brains unite.
Absolutely. It's yeah, so that was my specific instance where I was trying to be someone else. But I have a story to an embarrassing thing to sort of level the playing field a bit.
Yeah, you were 6. You were not the villain in that story where you tried to get one over on a teacher. That just I liked the story. It did make me feel better.
This potentially could. So I never tried like a drop of alcohol until I got to college, and
Good start.
I was babysitting my friends pretty much every weekend. I would be sober friend. I would get everyone home safe. I was just not drinking. And what I learned about that was I hate drunk people when I'm sober. So
It's a different playing field. Yeah.
yeah, when you're a freshman at a school like OSU, my friend group was 18 people. So I was the lone sober person in a group full of 18 people. So my nights were exhausting.
Oh God, that's a literal kindergarten class. You can't. That's one person. Good God.
Absolutely. Occasionally someone else would be kind of sober, but for the most part it was just me. So I eventually decided to start drinking, and
Can't beat them, join them. Hell yeah.
I liked it too much, and
Whoopsie.
so yeah, so I got this big head about me in my freshman year of college because I realized that if you're confident about anything, you can really do like you can really go anywhere, because we weren't getting into parties as freshmen. We weren't getting to, hang out in places we wanted to. So I just started walking into places. And as I started drinking more and more, I would just walk into house parties and like small get-togethers. And there's one in particular. I woke up with 150 photos, and I'm like lifting weights in one of them. I have like there's one picture where I'm in like the center of like five girls, and they're all like they have huge smiles on their faces. My arms are wrapped around them, and I woke up with I wrote on my arm, uh, check the freezer, was all I wrote on my arm. So I go and look at the freezer, and there's nothing in there. But I get a text from a number I don't know, like, "Hope you got home okay. Do you happen to know where all of our condiments went?"
And you said,
Check the freezer.
and they were.
Apps, they were frozen solid, and but their freezer was stuffed because apparently when they said, "All right, it's time," because they were all older than me, they were all seniors. They lived off campus. I don't even really know where I was to this day, but they were like, "All right, we're going to bars. You're clearly not going to be able to come with us, so
Yeah.
you need to leave." And I was like, "No." And so I started grabbing all of their condiments out of the fridge, and
That's where the line is. That's where the line where confidence will stop letting you get away with things. When you freeze people's mustard, that's the line. It's right there. It's a thin line. It's as thin as a mustard seed, but it's right there when you freeze the mustard at a home that you don't know people at. How wildly you had Bill Murray energy without the age or clout to just like invade barbecues to be like, I belong here. Yeah, no, let's take photos. Oh shit, that's really good, man. That's fun.
So yeah, I definitely had my fair share of drunk antics.
See, I feel better now. The balance, everything's nice and even. Yeah, yeah. Podcasting's good.
It's all about balance. Podcasting is good. It's a lot of fun. I actually so I actually I've always enjoyed reaching out to people that I enjoy creatively, just to like I know that someone who is successful creatively is going to have people reaching out a lot. So what I try to do is, especially if it's someone who's got, say 10,000 followers or less, or, they've got, one album out and they released it 2 months ago. That's the point
Yeah,
where I really try to reach out to people and just say like, "Hey, I really appreciate your stuff." But as someone who has nothing to offer them, there's nowhere to go with that conversation. I can't say,
right.
"Hey, I want you to talk to me. I want to be your friend now." So I want to have an hour and a half long conversation with you. Do you want to go on a Zoom with me? You can't say that, but
No, but you can. You 100% can. And you
it
have to.
doesn't go as yeah.
No, it doesn't. But every once in a while, man, you're going to get that person that you never thought would say yes, that you never thought would be like, yeah, I'm down. I'll actually be in Columbus. Do you want to do it in person? shoot every shot you don't think you have a single shot to make.
Absolutely. You know, I think about like Hot Ones. The reason that we know what that show is because Bert Kreischer was a big fan. And
No shit.
in the same year that the machine blew up, um, you know, he was a
Oh,
fan of Hot Ones. He reached out and he did an episode and he promoted the hell out of it. And you know,
that's dope.
I also think about like Mike Birbiglia told a story about he did a search on Google, like in like early Google days, and he just searched his school and comedians, and there was only one comedian who had ever gone to his school, and it was Jim Gaffigan. So he calls Jim Gaffigan, like the Jim Gaffigan's home phone number was in this directory. He calls Jim Gaffigan. Jim Gaffigan picks up, and Mike Birbiglia is like, "Oh my gosh, hi! I am trying to become a comedian. Could I have lunch with you?" And so Jim Gaffigan said, "Yeah, I'm free next Tuesday. How about we meet in this cafe?" So Mike Birbiglia takes a bus to New York and goes and sits in this cafe. And Jim Gaffigan was 2 hours late, but he showed up. And so Mike Birbiglia was like, "I don't have anything to do." So he just sat in the cafe waiting, thinking maybe Jim Gaffigan's going to show up. And Jim Gaffigan gave him all of this amazing advice about, he said, "Are you in acting classes? Because comedy is acting. You know, you are getting up there and you're performing, knowing how to act to an extent, you know." That was Jim Gaffigan's approach. Now, Jim Gaffigan is heavily an actor.
Jim Gaffigan is the type of person that I could never take any piece of advice from Jim Gaffigan because there's always 2/3 of my brain that thinks, when am I going to find out this is a bit? Like when it, like I'll be doing this advice I got from Jim Gaffigan. I've done it for 3 years. It's been fine, and then something I had no idea was going to happen that somehow he did will happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. He's like a wizard. He's a weird wizard that weaves situational weirdness into laughter. He's one of my favorite humorists.
He's so good, and he's the first stand-up that I ever got to see live. And
oh, no kidding.
yeah, it was awesome. He was a large amorphous blob on the stage, but
Hell yeah.
he was just
Where'd you see him at?
hilarious. Miami University. It was a student show, and my brothers went to college there, so I just happened to get to see him. But yeah, since then, growing up, the way I made friends was actually kind of forcing people to sit down and watch stand-up comedy with me. So
hey, you want to see something funny? Come here.
exactly. And for me, it was a way, like, those became the inside jokes, the quoting
Right.
stand-up comedians. And for me, if I could get someone to sit down and partially learn half an hour of stand-up that I also know, we have a connection now.
Strong connection. Yeah, arguably. And what a great way to cast a net for friendship. Because if they tune out, fine, whatever. They don't get it. It's fine. Blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. But if they do zero in on it and you can have that moment where you start laughing so hard, you look at each other and bond. Those are the kinds of things. I can't remember. Oh man, my fucking brain. I want to say it was Pete Holmes, but it's probably not his joke. But I don't think it was him. But somebody said, "You ever laugh so hard you look at someone and make a friend?" It's just stayed in my brain. Oh man, I'm gonna have to make a social media post about how that's accredited to the right person later. Oh man, when you put something on the internet and then it gives you homework.
Absolutely. And I have a habit of, like, I'll think of a quote. I will, with ADHD, sometimes words just completely leave your brain. They're just gone.
Right.
And so in my last interview, I was talking about how Chris Gethard said that for him, at one point, he was starting to gain some traction, and his therapist said, "I think you could be a professional comedian, but I think you need to give yourself no other choice." So for him, he had a really stable job, and he was not giving his all to comedy, and his therapist's advice was bite the bullet, take the leap. And I could not remember for the life of me who said that, but I'm gonna have to go in and be like, Chris Gethard said.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man. Oh, why did you? Oh man. why is why is something that someone else's therapist, fourth party through someone else, resonating so aggressively with me right now? Oh, that hurts. Uh, do you think that your full-time job would ever be comedy?
Oh gosh, it like if you could say, hey, do you want to go be a headliner now?
No, 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 no. Not what I'm saying.
Do you mean, do I think I could put the work into getting there?
Not what I'm asking. Uh,
Okay.
if you could see the roadmap and literally be like, okay, this is the road to being a full-time professional comedian. This is everything that it comes with. This is what you would have to do. If you do these things, this will happen. Obviously, that's a fallacy. But there's this other road that doesn't have a bunch of spikes on it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's what I'm asking. Do you see yourself being a professional comedian? Because that's the real question. Are you taking the road that you know has road spikes?
Absolutely. And that's such a good question, because I've thought a lot about that. I in my current job, I have a roadmap to a pretty comfortable lifestyle. I am in a company that trains from within, which is a super rare thing to find.
Yeah, I know, dude. Oh, God, you're like me in Columbus. Oh.
And you're right. There's tax all over it. I would say if I got to the point where I could see the roadmap, personally, like that lifestyle, I do think I could step into that and love it, because some of the happiest I've ever been in my life are traveling. I went to a really weird high school where we twice a year we actually went on 2 week long trips, and
Okay.
every fall you did some sort of like community service based thing or life planning based thing, and then every spring you got to choose what you wanted to do. So I got to do my freshman year, I got to go on tour with my steel drum band, and we went and played a bunch of concerts in Chicago and Columbus and Cincinnati.
Well, that's where the similarities end. I was not in a steel drum band, let alone a traveling one, sir. My God.
That was such a unique like 2 week long experience. I was in a band for a long time, but the traveling was 2 weeks.
How many gigs do you do over those 2 weeks?
We did like six.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a fair amount. We performed at four schools, and two of the schools we did two performances each, because they
Okay.
were. We performed at the Ohio State School for the Blind, which was so cool because it's a room full of people with perfect pitch, and so we got to line up. Everybody who had perfect pitch was walked up, and they did a competition where we would play notes one at a time, and then they would go down and guess. And then we got to the point where we had three people who could name, if you did 7 notes at a time, they could name each note individually. Like, it was one of the
That's
wildest things I've ever done.
that's so far beyond a triad, man. Like when you start adding like even four notes at the same time, there's so many overtones that like are tricking normal, not perfect pitch hearing ears that can do whatever wizardry that is. Oh man, I wish I had perfect pitch.
Oh yeah.
It's a thing that you can teach yourself. You can train your ears to do that. That was one of the classes that I had to take in Bible college, actually. And well, take is a strong word. That was one of the classes I failed slowly over the course of a year at Bible college. But it was one of the more weird ones because it was just a professor at the front of a room with a piano that would go dun dun. Is that a third? You're wrong. It's a minor third. Again. Dr. Platt was kind of a jerk, but he was fun. He was a fun jerk.
I've had a couple of fun jerks. I had in my hardest class ever in college, the woman who was teaching it had also written the textbook. And so she was the kind of
Oof,
person,
not okay.
no.
Nope,
So
nope,
she
nope,
was the
nope, nope,
kind of
nope.
person who could say on page 67 in the middle of the third paragraph, I'm pretty sure what it says is this. And she would say it and it would be word for word what was in the book. And, so she was
What?
insane.
That's academic narcissism. When you are
Yeah.
teaching your own book, it's like Jesus was just like, if you turn to Hebrews, not okay, not okay. What was the professor's name?
Pasha Peffer.
Well, I'm not going to do anything with that. I think that's enough on its own, and we can leave that right there.
I think so too. So, tell me about doing shows with Rob Wilfong.
Oh, Rob Wilfong. Rob Wilfong is my future. That's just what I'm going to be one day. And I met Rob very early on in my comedy career. And the first show I ever did with Rob was, it was probably my first showcase that I ever got booked on anything. And so like my face was on a poster and I felt real cool. And there was this guy that was like older and like not chiseled. That's the wrong word. Rob Wilfong is not chiseled. Grizzled is much closer. Smoked and hardened is much closer. Rob used to drive this wonderful red like Honda Civic, or maybe it was an old Camry. I can't remember. But it was a 2-door coupe that didn't have any cup holders in the front. And I don't know if that's because they were missing or it was just a cup holder underneath a pile of Marlboro Red's ashes that had built up over 7 years of doing shows across the Midwest. Rob was the first person to ever give me comedy advice. He was the first person to ever take me out on the road anywhere. He was also the first person that made me think, maybe I don't have to say yes to everything. Because there are shows that you go out and the thing that you learn isn't anything about comedy. It's about, what to look for in the signs of a show, whether or not that's going to be an experience that's worth your time versus the distance and all of those things to factor in. And Rob was like a key element in me learning all of that. Because he took a chance on me, and he takes chances, or at least he did before the pandemic. The pandemic shifted
Everything.
Rob Wilfong quit taking chances on youngins after the pandemic. But yeah, Rob would see talent in people and he would give them a shot. He had a room that was willing to just let him open up and run shows out of it. And when that room had people in it, it was fucking hot. It was a lot of fun. One of the first really good feelings about comedy I ever had was in that place that I can't remember the name of right now. It doesn't matter. It's not like it's an open business. It was a place that just opened when Rob had shows because his buddy owned it. I'm pretty sure he just had it for like a tax write-off or something. It was the reason he had a liquor license for the Lee's next door or whatever. I don't know. But it only ever opened for Rob's shows. And they were a lot of fun. But Rob was like my comedy dad in a way. Because and for a lot of people too, he would teach them things. He gave a shit about people that were dumb enough to try and do this. I say that with the caveat of this is my favorite thing and I'm diving headlong into it harder than I ever have in my life.
That's awesome.
And it's also a terrible idea, and anyone that wants to shouldn't. You're right to be petrified, honestly. Like, if you have the bug that makes you think, oh, I want to get on stage, perform, by all means. Try other shit before stand-up. Because when stand-up bites you, it is beautifully awful. Because it's there's nothing like getting laughs for the things that you thought were funny when no one was around.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're having half as much fun listening to this podcast as I had making it. That wraps up the getting to know you portion of the podcast. And before we start talking comedy, I want to remind everyone to go check out 4x3. They drop awesome original comedy content every week on their YouTube channel, youtube.com/@FOURXTHREE. Or you can find it by looking up 4x3 on YouTube. Let's get back to the show. So at this point, this is just what I call talking comedy. We're just going to ask you a couple of quick questions about your life. They don't need to be big stories, just kind of question and answer, and we'll run through it. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
I wanted to be a teacher. That was the first thing I remember wanting to be as a kid. And I realized later, shortly before I started doing comedy, that was just because when I was a kid, that was the only concept that I had in my head of a job that had an audience. Because those were the only two things, teacher, then comedian. And then I realized I just thought that a teacher was a comedian because my fourth grade teacher was hilarious.
That's awesome. Did he kind of inspire you in a way?
Him and my 10th grade English teacher were big inspirations for comedy just because Mr. Petrie was funny and he would be charismatic and conversational and almost like a Texas oil slick business tycoon way. And he's teaching fourth grade kids. And same thing with Mr. Curry. You know, he was actually the guy that introduced me to what's his name? He's dead. The one-liner comic, always wore sunglasses.
Stephen Wright.
Close, not as dark. Heroin.
Why
is that the thing I
Mitch
said?
Hedberg. I don't know, but for some reason it was the thing that jogged my memory.
It was the thing that usually jogged his too, unfortunately. Oh man, we're gonna end that right there.
Moving forward,
he was the guy that introduced me to stand-up comedians in a real way.
That's awesome. What advice would you give to someone about to do their first open mic?
Definitely don't do it at a club. If you're your very first time on stage, go to a bar. Find the Facebook group in your area. You don't have to live in a big city. Comedy is real oversaturated. Just type in wherever you live and stand-up comedy into the search bar of Facebook. That will bring you to a page that some other desperate schmuck has made and is adminning that has a schedule on it. I'm being way too mean. I'm just names are rolling through my head of the people that run the page that I'm on. Damn it. I'm not. Anyways, that's my advice. Go to a bar show first. Go to an open mic that you just show up and you put your name on a piece of paper like a nobody. And then don't be weird before you go on stage. Just stand off to yourself. Be nice if people approach you. Approach people if that's your thing. But just, try and not upset the status quo, because breaking into like a comedy scene is very much like invading a friend group that has been hanging out for a long time and has all of their own inside jokes, except the comics that they're inside joking about are each other. So no one else has seen it except them. So it's even more, and that can feel very cliquey. It really can. Like when you first go out and everyone's laughing around you and they're having a great time, and it's very easy to just be like, oh, I am never going to be on the inside of that snow globe. I will always be out here watching the snowfall on this beautiful city. Just keep coming to the window. Keep coming to the window, because eventually someone's going to notice you out there and they're going to notice you on stage. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. Just keep being nice. Keep showing up. Someone's going to open the window and be like, hey, do you want to smoke a cigarette or a joint? Or do you want, hey, that thing that you said was really funny. Something's going to happen. And then before you know it, you're going to look around and you're going to be like, oh shit, it's snowing. How did that happen? It's snowing.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that kind of also sparked this, was when I went to just a local show here at, there's a comedy club called The Attic. It's just above a pizzeria. Yeah. And after the show, I saw they had 5 openers, which I thought was really cool. And after the show, all the comedians walked across the street to the bar and got drunk together. And I was like, wow, this is really just a little community. on that, um, I've come back to this idea a lot. That just hearing the way comedians talk about comedy and each other. Do you feel like comedy is more of a community or a competition?
Oh no, it is not a competition. Comedy is art, and that should never be like a contest. That being said, I will be performing in the Funniest Person in Cincinnati contest this summer, which is a contest I do every year, and that contradicts my feelings about contests and art. But no, comedy should it should never be a competition. It should never ever be a competition. The only reason that you should ever feel good about being funnier than anybody else or getting bigger laughs than anybody else is because you got bigger laughs than you got last time. That shouldn't have anything to do with anybody else that's on the show or anything like that.
That's an awesome mentality. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I'm trying real hard to get to that advice myself. That's something that a perspective that I have to constantly switch myself back into because I am the first person to just be like, oh, I was the worst person on that show. Or equal and opposite the other way when I have had too many compliments in one day and my ego is just floating. And then I think that I was like, so much better than everyone else on the show. Like that's a dumb way to look at it. Everything is a process and a progress, and everything is progress if you are working at it. So that's what it should be. You should just focus on the work. If you were funnier than the time you were last time, that's all you should focus on.
That's awesome. Internal growth. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you love about comedy?
Oh, that I love a lot of things about comedy. The community was a big thing that I didn't expect to find because, when I first wanted to do stand up, the whole thing was I thought that was the coolest possible job that you could have, and I always loved getting that laughter from my friends, especially in like a group dynamic, when you're the one that everyone on the couches is looking at. You're like, oh, I've been telling this story for a minute and everyone's into it. How did that happen? So like that was really just like the biggest thing that drew me to it. But I didn't expect to find this nest and this net of people that were also like, hey, those moments when you're at a party and everyone at the couch is looking at you awesome, like that's the only time that you really feel alive. And that's like 2 minutes out of every year. Why don't we chase more of that? Why don't we all chase more of that together to the point that we are intolerable to the rest of society? And that is the community that you find as a comic. And you realize that the snow inside the snow globe is the ashes of what you resemble your old life to be, falling down around you as you are just like, oh man, I'm one of the weirdos now. I'm rapidly becoming unemployable. This is tight.
That was a heavy metaphor. I liked it though. I like that.
Thanks. It almost got away from me. I'm glad I was able to rein that bitch back in.
Do you hate anything about comedy?
Most of it. But that's only because I hate most things about anything that I create. Like I am very hard on my own stuff. And that's just because I would hate. I don't think I'm hard on myself because I actually think that I am that bad. I think I'm really hard on myself because I've watched too many other people go the other way and be completely disillusioned about their skill set or their accomplishments or what happened in a room. There's nothing worse than watching somebody get like some chuckles and then they come back and they're like, crush, Netflix, here I come. That's not a fun person to be around. And so like I try and cut my own knees out from under me to keep myself from ever becoming that person. And that's what I hate about comedy is when it does start to go good, I'm like, oh no, I have to start cutting higher. Oh man.
Yeah, I think especially in something as subjective as comedy, it's
right.
You want to keep yourself humble. You want to keep Conan says this all the time. You must stay current. You must
Yeah,
keep. You must keep trying to better yourself. Trying to pay attention to the landscape around you. Figure out what other
yeah,
people are doing. Figure out how you can differentiate yourself.
exactly.
Um,
There's like a
okay.
pulse to making people laugh that you have to stay on top of. And I'm so sorry. I will let you end the show now.
No, 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 Loren. I'm truthfully, Loren. I feel like I'm gonna have you back on at some point because I had to skip several questions because I I this has been
Oh
an awesome
God.
podcast. No,
Thank you so
don't feel
much,
bad.
man. This
This
has
has
been a
been
blast for real.
a ton of fun. I just have a couple more questions for you. What's the most valuable piece of advice you've received from a fellow comedian?
The most valuable piece of advice I ever got from a comedian is hands down, um, keep showing up, which is part of what I just said, and that was told to me by Blake. Blake Hammond was one of the people that like opened a window for me, and was like, "No, you're funny, man. Like one of the most terrifying things he ever told me was like, I'll write with you anytime." And I was like, I'm not funny. Why would you do that? Why would you waste your time helping me with, because I have nothing to offer you comedically or on the page. That's literally someone that I thought was hilarious throwing me a huge bone. And I never wrote with Blake. I never took him up on that. But just hearing someone throw that bone of confidence to you, you know. So keep
Yeah,
showing up.
absolutely.
It's huge,
Keep showing up. That it's funny. That's actually OSHA's advice as well. Um,
right?
Yeah, and she said specifically comedians. It's hard because it's such a tight knit community. It's hard to take a chance on everyone who shows up because you get the guy who lost his fantasy football league. You get the guy
Yeah,
who's just trying to try it once. And so she was like, it would hurt to try and get friendly with everybody who walks in the door.
yeah, yeah. You make connections with a person that you were like, you're really funny. Hey, here's what I can do for you if you're interested in this.
Hmm.
Imagine investing part of your artistic process in another human being that was just back with their wife in 2 months or something, or whatever the thing that shifted them into this life is suddenly no longer there, and you never see them again. So many people quit. So many people quit getting on stage for a lot of different reasons. But I totally get what she's saying about it. It would be incredibly hard to invest in all of those souls. Like you wouldn't have anything left.
Absolutely. All right, Lauren. Well, last time we're going to say this. This has been such a blast. Thank you so much for being on here with me today.
No, thank you, man. This has been great.
Course. Thank you again. Thank you for being here. I can't believe I'm doing a podcast. Seriously, I'm releasing all three of these over the next couple of weeks that I've done, and then I'm gonna be 3 months out until my first open mic. So
Exciting times, man.
yeah, giving myself 3 months to wrap it up. I think I've got about 7 minutes of stuff. I'm gonna pare it down to five,
Okay.
and
Hell yeah.
just give it a try and keep going.
Have you scoped out the spot yet? You know where you're going?
I have a buddy who does an open mic. It like a it's like a pizzeria in the short north in Columbus somewhere.
Okay. All right.
So kind of like what you said. I'm not going to go to a comedy club first. Going to try to find a venue where people can just literally not pay attention to me, and I can experience what it's like to stand on stage and do stand up.
Yeah. Hell yeah, dude.
All right, Lauren. So my final question for you today: if you could have any job in comedy, what would it be?
Oh, job in comedy. uh, uh, has been legend. I think. I think like that's
Like a washed up.
it's so gross, but I just want to be the character in Sam Talon's book. Like that's not a hero. That's not a good person. It's not an admirable individual, but like that dude is just That guy is literally my biological dad if he was a comic instead of a fry cook that did favors for bikers. Like it's so. Oh man, like if all I need is a lot of beer and a lot of cocaine, and I can do it. Like all I need are those two things. Well, and the thing that the therapist said, I have to make it my only option, which the cocaine might do that for me. So I feel like the
Potentially.
answer's in the question, really. Oh man, this is not how I wanted to affirm my life today. Oh man.
uh,
But yeah, washed up has been and final answer.
well, I normally say I think you're on your way, but I hope you're on your way to the pre-stages of that first.
Yeah. Hopefully, there's a rise without the fall, and I don't make all of the mistakes that were in that. But oh god, I'm remembering some of the shit. Why did I connect myself to that character? I don't want to be that guy anymore. I take everything back. I don't want to be that guy anymore. I'm backpedaling on that real hard. Jesus Christ. Read the book, though, for real. Running the Light, Sam Talent. Oh, it's one of the best books around stand-up comedy that you could read. And it's real short. It's like 214. I pulled that number out of my butt. But it's a very short book. It's incredibly good. It's so good that they're making a movie, and he's already working on the sequel. And
Oh, that's awesome.
this is my weird way to announce that I'm doing Sam Talent ad promotions for no reason for his entire career. Yes. So go follow Sam Talent on Instagram and listen to his podcast, Chubby Bean.
Well, if you could take a break from promoting someone else and promote yourself for a moment, would you tell all my listeners, all whoever is related to me that's listening to this right now, where to find you, what to look for?
You can find me. Instagram is the best place to follow me. That's where I post most of my show information. I used to have like a Facebook page, but that doesn't matter, so I'll talk about it less. But it's Loren Hutton Creative on Instagram, and I also have a TikTok that might be the same thing.
We'll
But
find out. I will.
I'm snazzy. There's a link tree on the Instagram. Just click on
Okay.
that. It'll take you to all of the podcast stuff. This is the first time I'm saying this out loud. This is fun. There's a link tree on my Instagram. You can click on it, and it goes to all my shit. Loren Hutton Creative.
Perfect. All right, Loren. Thank you so much for being here. This was awesome.
Hell yeah, dude. Thanks again.